This morning's readings come from the 19th Psalm, verses 1 through 14, and saying 77 of the Gospel according to Thomas. Psalm 19. The heavens herald your glory, O God, and the skies display your handiwork. Day after day they tell their story, and night after night they reveal the depth of their understanding. Without speech, without words, without even an audible voice, their cry echoes through all the world, and their message reaches the ends of the earth. For in the heavens the sun has pitched a tent. It comes forth with the grandeur of a wedding procession, with the eagerness of an athlete ready to race. It rises at one end of the sky and travels to the other end, and nothing escapes its warmth. Your law, O one who is perfect. It refreshes the soul. Your rule is to be trusted. It gives wisdom to the naive. Your purposes, O God, are right. They gladden the heart. Your command is clear. It gives light to the eyes. Holding you in awe, O one who is purifying. It endures. Your decrees are steadfast, and all of them just. They are more precious than gold, than the purest of gold, and sweeter than honey fresh from the comb. In them, your faithful people find instruction. There is great reward in keeping them. But who can detect one's own failings? Forgive the misdeeds I don't even know about. Keep your faithful one from presumption as well, so that my faults never control me. Then I will be blameless and innocent of a grave error. May the words of my mouth and the thoughts of my heart be pleasing in your sight, O one who is my rock and my Redeemer. The Gospel of Thomas, saying 77. Jesus said, It is I who am the light which is above them all. It is I who am the all. From me did the all come forth, and unto me did the all extend. Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. Ancient words from our many traditions for our present day understanding.
So how is it possible that so many of the voices of the climate change deniers come from the church? What is happening that so much of the church has been an enemy of science, discovery, and universal human rights? I ran across something very interesting in Christianity Today. I think maybe Christianity Today should be called Christianity from yesterday, but this article was called "A Christian Defense of Fracking." And I think it's going to be a blessing on your heart. Oh, Jesus talked about this so many times. It's actually quite brilliant in its kind of sad way. It goes, fracking and the work of oil and gas workers more broadly has positive global impacts. Electricity and other first world normalcies, computers, cell phones, x-ray machines, bulldozers have become more affordable. As a result, medical manufacturing facilities have been built in Vietnam, and money transfer kiosks have popped up in every corner of the world. We won't talk about the sectors of the society that can access that. Doctors can conduct surgeries after dark. Children can read in the night. Pastors in remote areas can access top-shelf theological trainings. Billions of people in Africa and Asia are connected to the global economic grid, lifting hundreds of millions out of extreme poverty, thanks to fracking. Now, what's interesting is, how does theology twist to that? I think it's a very important question. What is wrong with that theology that allows it to go there? I mean, because you could also say, well, one of the problems that created poverty in the third world was countries like ours exploiting people and colonizing them and stealing their stuff. That could also be a way to help them out a little bit. But it's almost like, you could say human trafficking helps some people out of poverty. Well, yeah, technically, but when you're poisoning people's water table, there's a problem with that. But apparently it doesn't show up in the theology. Here's another. This is biblical fracking. And it's just as true today as it was when it was written. Biblical fracking. Now see, isn't that strange? Biblical fracking, in the spirit of its historical roots and its geological namesake, means reaching into the cracks and crevices of the biblical narrative to extract the richness that lurks there. I was one time watching a televangelist, which is one of my little neurotic pleasures, because I'm fascinated by it. How does the mind twist like that? Because as a clergy person, I have to ask that question. Does any of that sickness hide in traditional liberal theological circles? Spoiler alert, hell yeah. That we need a radical reformation at an area way beyond our comfort zone for Christianity not to be toxic. But this biblical expert was saying that they had checked the Bible and the word oil occurs in the Bible 192 times. Olive oil. And then it didn't explain that doesn't include petroleum products. I would suggest that the focus of the church, both liberal and conservative, the theology that makes us comfortable, and the focus on the supernatural, shuts down the element that recognizes the sacred in nature. I say it almost every month, but we have to realize that this relishing and worshiping of miracles makes it impossible to see nature as sacred. There's a contradiction there that we have to come to terms with. That doesn't mean that we start off comfortable with that. But when your idea of the sacred is interruptions of natural law, how are you going to find the sacred in the ordinary, everyday experiences? Nature becomes a threat to your idea of a supernatural agent who makes things happen. The idea of the will of God is one of the most dangerous ideas in all of history, because people look at it and assume that God is like them, just with superpowers. So people talk about the will of God and they talk about hurricanes. And the reason that this hurricane hit New Orleans, what was it? I'm trying to remember. Oh yeah, homosexuality. Yeah, it's always homosexuality. But it's also always the Bible Belt, and they never mention that. That kind of gets left out. And that would imply that if you have a drought, you need more homosexuals. I mean, wouldn't it? I'm just a humble country preacher, but it seems like. Wouldn't it be great to be a Christian meteorologist? It's hailing. It's hailing in the country. Thank you, Williamson County. I mean, you can just blame it on whoever you're mad at that day. So I want to ask us to go beyond our comfort zone. And I want us to think about what is a notion of the will of God that your children are going to be able to use after they've learned science. Because what we do when we stay in our comfort zone is give religion to our children that they will need to jettison if they choose to be sane. And it's a choice you can make. Either way is fine. But we can't say the things that we're comfortable in. God is the maker of heaven and earth. And also affirm the galactic processes. One of them is poetic and one of them is factual. The poetry is important too, but we have to know it's poetry. So we're going to look at some passages today, and what I'm suggesting that you explore is the notion that the will of God could very constructively be replaced with nature's way. What was God doing before we got here? Isn't it kind of summarized by nature? The world had a certain nature to it before we got here. And if the will of God is a meaningful concept, then it had to be that. So, what difference would it make if instead of talking about biblical truth, we talked about biblical symbols that call us to reality? And reality is what is there, what passes through science, what affirms universal human rights, what helps us see the earth as our home and humanity as our family. What understanding of the symbols would take us to that place? Now, what I don't want to do is switch to just the opposite side and do a liberal version of twisting Scripture to go where I want it to go. So I'm not going to say, Jesus said you're the light of the world. Clearly that means solar panels. But I'm going to try not to do that. And I'm going to try to not do I walked along the beach and I saw two sets of carbon footprints. I'm also not going to just pass out information. I go to places with dedicated people who are really concerned about the environment. And they sometimes you can see them getting depressed themselves. When we ask why most people are not really responding adequately to the climate crisis, I disagree with a lot of the people that think the problem is they don't understand. I think you probably understand. And it probably would not be helpful to you if I said, well, here's some more statistics that you don't know. Right? You know it's a problem. And trying to scare you more is probably not going to help either. The question, I think, is what is it that has alienated us from nature? Where we don't realize that it's the source of every value that has meaning. I think that is the question that we have to get to. When I do sermons, like I talk about immigration at least every month. But I don't do a sermon on immigration. Right? I do biblical themes, the great themes of spirituality, and use that as an example. I don't normally do sermons on ecology. I talk about nature every week almost. I consider myself a nature mystic. I'm trying to find the sacred in the natural. But sermons aren't TED Talks. They're not lectures. They're attempts to get in touch with the great themes of humankind. What does it mean to be a human being in the cosmos? So we're going to be talking about ecology, but we're going to be talking about something that calls us to ecology, a great understanding of spirituality that calls us to respond to that. And the question I want to ask is, if the Bible does not call us to accept the natural world as sacred, should we keep it at all? See, because to me, if religion doesn't lead us to human rights, if it doesn't lead us to ecological sanity, then it's a problem and we have to get rid of it. But what I want to suggest, obviously, or I wouldn't have a job, is that that's what the message has been from the beginning. It just got lost along the way. Think about this. When Jesus wanted to give a graduate course in his inner teachings, think about what it means that he took his top disciples out of the city and into the country and into nature, to the Sea of Galilee. And that the backdrop for what he was teaching was beauty. And he said, if you want to know the will of God, if you want to know how God enters the world, look at the birds. Have you ever thought about that? You're probably not going to learn that in church. What does that mean that when he's talking about the way of God, he says, look at the birds, look at the flowers? Or think of our psalm today, where it's going to talk about the will of God, about the law of God. But it doesn't start there. It starts by saying the stars cry out the way of God. Because religion has to lead us to reality, not to itself, not to belief. If religion only leads us to dogma and belief, it will kill us. Or at least it will hurt us very badly. It has to lead us to awareness, to truth, and truth means relatedness to what is there, to the people that are there, to the animals, to the plants, to the universe that is there. That is the truth that Jesus said would set us free. But the word doesn't mean what's on a page. The word is the patterns of things, the patterns of life, the patterns of nature. And so when it talks about the word, it's getting past the written word to that experience of the mystery within nature that guides us, that sustains us, that lifts us up. Think about what the psalmist says. It's like the stars are crying out the best sermon of all time, and they don't use any words. And yet the message goes out all over the world. They didn't have the science yet, but can't you see they're talking about what Einstein discovered later, and Newton, and the greatest minds of all humankind? They're talking about the patterns of things. Not of somebody's beliefs, but of the real world, which is nature. And the Gospel of Thomas, which didn't make it into the Bible, but it made it into St. Andrews for a sermon series, which is mystical Christianity, and you see it there. That in John, when Jesus says, I am this, I am that, he's talking about as life. He's talking as life, as the life process, as the way of nature. If you want to make sense of it, he's not this arrogant person talking about himself. He's trying to help you feel within yourself, within your bones, that you're an expression of nature. Listen to this. I'm going to read it twice. Jesus said, it is I who am the light, which is above them all. It is I who am the all. From me did all come forth, and unto me did all extend. Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up a stone, and you will find me there. Not an invisible human being someplace else, but the essence, not just of truth, but of reality itself. Let's listen to it again and think now of if the universe could talk to us. Jesus is trying to put that into human speech. Jesus says, it is I who am the light, which is above them all. It is I who am the all. From me did the all come forth, and unto me did the all extend. Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. Now, technically, what I'm saying today is heresy. Sue me. Go ahead. But it seems also to me that it's what Jesus was talking about. And I'd much rather be a heretic in the church than an alien in the cosmos in which I live. Can we substitute, without losing anything important, the concept of the will of God and the way of nature? I'm asking you to explore that as a possibility. Because if we do that, we don't have to go looking somewhere else. Do you realize how lost you are if you're looking for something that's everywhere? That's a real bad kind of lost. But what if you're being called to wake up where you are as a footprint to all of nature? And to realize you're not in nature, you are nature. And then you not only know what to do about the ecological crisis, right? You take care of your home, but you have the power to do it. Because it's not about winning or losing. It's about being faithful to your source. Maybe you'll win and we'll turn things around. And Trump will say, I've been a damn fool. Maybe. But worst case scenario, you will be at your station. You will be doing your duty. You will be living out of your roots. And what could be more joyful than that? What could be more powerful than that? But we have to overcome the sickness that capitalism has given us all of a false value system. And the idea that if it makes money, it's okay, even if it poisons the planet. See, we have to realize that's insanity. That we're not talking about conservative, liberal, we're talking about survival of the species. And a lot of other species too. But also, we can't love and respect one another if we're not in tune with nature, which is our source, our common source. That is the common world in which we live and breathe. Listen to this. This is Wendell Berry. And if you're ever looking for inspiration that doesn't deny the ecological crisis, Wendell Berry is a great place to start. He comes up through a farmer type stuff. He's Christian, but there's very little BS in it. It's all grounded into nature. He goes, we have lived our lives by the assumption that what is good for us would be good for the world. We have been wrong. We must change our lives so that it will be possible to live by the contrary assumption that what is good for the world will be good for us. And that it requires that we make the effort to know the world and learn what is good for it. In other words, nature's way. And that the language of religion personifies that. It helps us understand it personally, to feel it from our bones. But it doesn't become a replacement for the real world. That's very important. One of the great nature religions is Taoism. It's Chinese. And I secretly sneak it in all the time. Because I think it's the kind of thing Jesus was talking about, the way of things. The world is a sacred vessel that cannot be changed. One who changes it will destroy it. One who seizes it will lose it. Even liberals are trying to engineer their way out of this. It's not going to work because all of our dreams and schemes are artificial. You can't balance nature and business because nature is the balance. Whatever we're going to do has to be balanced to that. If you think about it, everything else is insane. So we have to realize that as human beings, we try to love each other, we try to find the courage to stand up for things. But the real power comes from something deeper than that, than the human story. And it calls us to bravely stand up for the earth and do what we can do. But victory or failure is not a part of this game plan. You live out of your roots. You have either the maximum chance of turning it around, or you go down with nobility, with joy, with peace, and the pride that you kept to your station. Again, Wendell Berry. When we try to have religion that's tame, we lose the real energy of the heart, which is wild and crazy and wants to go to places that you're afraid of. If you listen to the life within you, it's going to a whole different place than what you were taught to go after. But listen to this. He goes, as I've read the Gospels over the years, the belief has grown in me that Christ did not come to found an organized religion, but came instead to found an unorganized one, which is good news for us at St. Andrews. Jesus seems to have come to carry religion out of the temples and into the fields and sheep pastures, onto the roadsides and the banks of the rivers, into the houses of sinners and publicans, into the town and the wilderness, toward the membership of all that is here. Well, you can read and see what you think. That sounds like Jesus in the parables. What we're looking for is not in some supernatural place. And all the begging in the world is not going to get us what we need if the person we're begging to is imaginary. But what if your roots go into the cosmos itself? Where else could you be coming from? But from nature, from the cosmos, from the profound mystery of life. Maybe that's where your courage is hiding, and your hope, and your joy. Psalm 19 says that God's word is a light to the eyes. See, dogma isn't a light to the eyes. Belief isn't a light to the eyes. Catechism is not a light to the eyes. Awareness, awakening. And you see not a call to some other world, but you see heaven is here and now. And you realize the vitality of living out this moment with its fears, with its dangers, with its frustrations. When we feel lost and discouraged, Jesus calls us to leave the city, to leave our town, to leave our organized religion. And look at the stars. Just look at them. Can you really despair when you realize that's where you really come from? And look at the birds. Look at the flowers. Can you really despair if you realize that is your family? The web of life is your true home. And that mere awareness feeds your soul. If you break a rock in half, what you're looking for is there. It surrounds us and we walk through it like it wasn't there. But it's an ocean of wisdom and compassion and love. And it is your heritage, your gift. Because it was that out of which you were born. It is that in which you live. And it is that into which you die. Van Gogh was once asked if he feared the failure. He had so much frustration in his life, came in and out of sanity. He said, do you fear the dark? And he said, I've loved the stars too kindly to ever fear the night. I invite you now to your own reflection on these words.